and welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Tom Fernelli. That's Danny Cannell. I'm Chip Patterson coming to you live at youtube.com/cover3 and everywhere you get your podcasts on demand. Thanks for hanging out. Smash that subscribe, smash that like, and come and join us in the chat, a.k.a. the Cover 3 tailgate, where Grant understands the real storyline of Tuesday night. Missouri cannot be killed. Amazing. Amazing. Our long national nightmare continues.
No. You can't do that. Strength of schedule is all that matters this year. And their schedule is really tough. Like, they have a strong schedule. Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they got smoked in two of those games. They played them, Chip. Like, Indiana doesn't play those teams. Indiana couldn't have got blown out that bad by A&M and Alabama. Indiana couldn't have done that. No way.
How?
Schedule.
How? Well, I think I know the answer, but like, how did the college football playoff invitational rankings become a culture war? Because that's what's broken out.
It really is.
I know.
Just we make everything a culture war these days.
Like the long, lengthy explanations. Did you know that I have seen no less than a dozen of individualized resume rankings? Like, no, I found the way to truly prove that the team in the conference that I like plays the toughest. Mm-hmm. I like Tom's reference, I guess, from Monday's show, right? When you said, hey, understand the difference in strength of schedule is like this. When we talk about anything from like 25 to 70. Mm-hmm. Amazing.
I mean, I just want to start by actually thanking ESPN for a second, because at least they did the show the correct way this time.
First time, lay out the
third week. They started the show with an explainer of how it all works, which they hadn't done in the first 2 weeks. And then they released the rankings 25-1, and then they did the bracket. It made so much more sense for people that don't actually know everything right off the top of their heads.
Well, it's obvious that they're big Cover 3 fans. Mm-hmm. That's the only thing that I can assume. You know?
This is the first show that I've watched this year. So I felt like it was very similar to what it was on. 10 years ago, I was on this show. It's pretty crazy. It's a long way off. The first year, the first one ever we were on.
Were you making like terrible arguments like McElroy and remaining silent?
No, I made arguments I make now, and maybe that's why I'm sitting here with you guys.
So
I didn't like some of those arguments.
All right.
I mentioned
go ahead.
I was going to say, I mentioned it to both of you before we started, and I don't, honestly, if Illinois is at 25, I really don't mind that Mizzou's ranked at 23, just to be honest with you, because if you look at their resumes, they're very similar. But to me, it was funny that as soon as Illinois pops up at 25, McElroy insinuates that Illinois is only ranked to prop up Penn State. And then 2 spots later, when Mizzou's ranked, completely silent. Doesn't say a word, has absolutely nothing to do with any of the other SEC teams. If you're going to go in on the conspiracy, Greg, come on, give it all.
Well, ultimately, like, they face the same thing that AP voters face, the same thing that I look at on Saturday nights when I'm trying to figure out what AP voters are going to do. Both those teams are in a pool that you had to pick from. And I think I called it a grab bag. Like, you've got about 8 or 9 teams. And so Illinois was ranked early in the season. We were really hyped about the wins against Kansas and Nebraska. Hindsight has said that, well, I mean, Kansas wins looking better and better, by the week, but hindsight says that maybe those victories aren't quite what we made them out to be at the time, but still among 7 and 3 teams, Illinois, perfectly fine. Missouri, I know that I'm my tongue's a little bit in my cheek here, but who else are you going to put in there besides Missouri is also a fair question.
Yeah, we're at the time of the year where 3-loss teams between 20 and 25 really can't be frowned upon too much. Although I did send out the tweet I said I was going to send out on Saturday night.
What was that?
The "he can't keep getting away with it" meme, and I tagged Eli, so he'll see it.
All right, so Oregon 1, Ohio State 2, Texas 3, Penn State 4, Indiana 5. No changes there. No big surprises there. Notre Dame at 6. Now we get to the fun part. Alabama jumps up to number 7. Indiana is at 8. Then we get a drop, Ole Miss and Georgia. DK, it looks like head-to-head is respected, at least in this case. Then Georgia.
Miami's at 8, by the way. You said Indiana.
Sorry, Alabama, Miami, Ole Miss, Georgia. Tennessee checks in at 11. Boise State at 12. Head-to-head, not respected, as SMU is at 13 at 9-1, and BYU is 14 and 9-1. That is an 8-spot drop for the BYU Cougars. Then Texas A&M at 15. Let's just look at that top 15. Danny, anything that stand out to you?
I think you get a little bit of an out with the SMU BYU because of the different quarterback. Like you could say, hey, that was a different team. They were still playing Preston Stone. Kevin Jennings wasn't the full-time starter. I think that maybe gives you an out. But I do think, and the more games you play, clearly you can't respect all of these. I think it's still getting interesting. I mean, this is the first week we've seen Boise with, it is, because last week it was BYU. This is the first week we've seen people recognize, oh my goodness, Boise State could be a 4 seed and get a bye.
Yeah.
That's going to be a rough pill to swallow for a lot of people. Now, will it stay that way? Because, in the old one, there were the metrics, how you can weigh. So do they weigh a Big 12 championship more than a Mountain West championship? Will be interesting to see if they try to bounce Boise State out of there to give a Big 12 champion 2 losses. Assuming there's no more losses, would they give them the spot there? But for now, I think that's going to catch a lot of people's attention to see them getting a bye, which I don't agree with that. Like I do think there's a different level between Power 4 and Group of 5, and I've always been a champion for Group of 5. Give them an opportunity, but if it plays out like this, I think that's a pretty incredible advantage for Boise State, and I do worry about what potentially could happen in that first game. It's the way it works out. It's the way it works out.
Can we stay there for a second? UNLV getting in to the top 25 is a good sign for Boise. It also means that Boise needs UNLV to win the rest of the way and be able to continue to stay inside that top 25, because the way that it's looking with Arizona State getting in at 21, with Colorado being at 16, with BYU being at 14, I mean, Iowa State down there at 22. Basically, all of our Big 12 contenders are all in the top 25. So it is very likely that the Big 12 championship game will be a ranked-on-ranked situation. The Big 12 chaos scenario would be an unranked team winning the Big 12, where, therefore, your champion will have had to have come from outside the top 25. So you've at least got that going for you when it comes to the Boise State thing. Will whoever wins the Big 12 have a good enough win on Conference Championship Saturday to be able to jump up in there and get that bye?
Well, the Big 12 is what confuses me out of all of this. The most confusing ranking to me is BYU, who loses its first game, and yes, it lost to Kansas, but they fall to 14. Now, Miami is at 8, Boise is at 12, SMU is 13th. Using a lot of the metrics that they use to do these rankings, BYU's strength of record is 8th. Its strength of schedule is 53rd. Miami's strength of record is 9th. Its strength of schedule is 54th. SMU's is 14th and 86th. Boise's is 15th and 76th. So BYU has a higher strength of record than all those teams. They have a higher strength of schedule than all those teams. They beat one of those teams. How is Miami, justify placing Miami 6 spots ahead of BYU?
Got nothing.
Exactly. So I don't understand what they're doing here. I get that why you drop BYU, but why are you dropping them below all those teams when all these metrics that you point to all the time say that they're better than these teams?
Game control. That was another one they've used in years past. They were a little too close to disaster with a couple of those games. Oklahoma State, those are pretty much losses in their book.
You ready for that? You ready for this? Game control. Also on ESPN's website.
Oh.
BYU 15th. Miami 19th. SMU 16th. Boise 17th. So they also have a higher game control ranking than all of those teams. I can't wait to get the quote from Ward Manuel on this one, because I'm sure it'll be wonderful.
So not to because I'm not sure that specifically strength of record is on the team sheets, but I'm also not sure that they use the team sheets as much as they just talk about it. I think if it's going to be discussion, vote, discussion, vote, discussion, vote, very Robert's Rules of Order, parliamentary procedure type stuff, then it probably does get a little bit more loose and flexible with it. But I think that remember BYU got a big bump after beating Utah in controversial fashion. And we were looking at it because Indiana and BYU moved up like a decent bit, and Indiana had just struggled with Michigan. So to me, what I see with this drop is the committee returning to where they were with their very first set of rankings, where BYU looked disrespected. The fact that they were like, well, see that this is them returning to their starting point with the Cougars, that they don't think they're they think they are a perfectly fine number 14 team in the country. I just don't think that they were comfortable with moving to 6. It's just that initial set of rankings probably got some blowback. Then they got another win under their belt, and we saw Indiana and BYU go make that big bump. Because again, Indiana over Michigan, BYU over Utah, those wins were not impressive. Those wins did not do anything other than make it impressive that you made a week longer into the season still being undefeated. And it's like that was what was rewarded with the big jump in the rankings. So look, Indiana's facing the same thing. If Indiana gets crushed by Ohio State, they are like, look at what BYU did when they got dropped. That's probably a hint at what would happen to the Hoosiers.
I don't think so. I think Indiana would fall. I don't think they'll fall 8 spots.
Well, all right. So losing at home to Kansas, losing on the road to Ohio State, apply your own metric.
Mm-hmm.
But
and there's another really important factor here that I don't think you mentioned that I think plays a role. BYU is in the Big 12. They don't want 2 Big 12 teams in the playoff. We can, like the elephant in the room, we know who controls the thing. The Big 10 and the SEC. You're not going to drop a Big 10 team that's only got 1 loss as far as you're going to drop the Big 12 team, because if you drop BYU to where you've put BYU now, and then if they win the Big 12, fine, they're automatically in. But if you get a situation where BYU goes in there with 1 loss and Colorado gets to the Big 12 championship with 2 losses and the game is close and it's competitive, if BYU is in that top 12, you might have to, it'd be hard to justify leaving them out after a close loss there with there's 2 losses, depending on how many losses there are elsewhere in the SEC and the Big 10. So by putting them down to 14th, when you leave them there after they lose the Big 12 championship, potentially, you haven't really, made it too obvious.
Right.
Let's take a look at the bracket. We got the bracket if it happened. Ooh. Let's see. So that would be Ohio State hosting BYU. That would be Notre Dame hosting Alabama, Penn State hosting Georgia, Indiana hosting Ole Miss. Again, a lot of this is going to be changing in terms of the actual matchups. But yeah, I think you're right, Danny. I think it's that Boise State. Like that's the path that I think would make people freak out, that Ohio State, if this were to be the bracket that we see that we're shown on youtube.com/cover3, that Ohio State would be gifted the bracket opportunity to run it basically all the way to the semis. Right?
Yeah. And that is, to be fair, our girl Mackenzie Brooks has said a couple times, is it more beneficial to have the 5 seed than it would be to have the first round bye? And in this case, if you're Ohio State, you're like, have fun, Oregon. We'll see you in the semis. Play the winner of Bama, Notre Dame, and we'll go through 2 games. You can have 1, and we'll just sit here and go through these 2 teams as double-digit favorites. So that is an interesting path that a team could potentially take.
That is not a beneficial spot for Ohio State to be. Ohio State will have played in the Big 10 championship. They will have lost. They will be the 5 seed playing BYU. They will beat BYU in all likelihood, but BYU is a very physical football team. And Ohio State's already banged up. The thing we don't think about when we talk about this 5 seed stuff, and Bud's brought it up too, a lot of people have brought it up. Injuries happen against everybody, whether you're favored by 24 or favored by 2. players get hurt. Playing an additional game adds in the chaos of you might lose. It's possible. We can pretend it's not, but look at the situation we're all in right now, putting these teams in and arguing between these 2 and 3 lost teams that we'll be arguing about. But injuries will also happen. So what happens if you go play BYU and now Will Howard's hurt? Oh, well, at least you only got to play Boise State next week in Ashton Genty. But now you beat Boise State. Now you've got to play Oregon. And Will Howard's hurt in a game that maybe you wouldn't have had to play if you'd have just won your league instead. Like if I'm Oregon, give me that week off and then give me Notre Dame and Alabama because I'm not winning the national title without beating those teams anyway. So I'd rather just play fewer games.
I do like that about the jump from 4 to 12, that you have to beat multiple good teams. Like you've got to be ready.
No fake team is winning a national title.
No. The hottest team among good teams could, there could be like what we'll have a field of 12. There might be 5 teams and we'll see who gets the hottest or who gets the best breaks.
That's where like a Georgia's scary. We were just talking like they've looked awful for a month and then you see what they can do if Carson Beck is hot. And that's like, oh, that team you could see running through a couple if they keep up that pace of play, if they play like that. You know what my favorite thing about that bracket we threw up there, the first round, and I do think this is why you're seeing SEC teams clamor for higher rankings. Look at these SEC teams, where they would have to go. This
Columbus,
would be a dream
South
scenario.
Bend, Happy Valley,
yeah.
Bloomington.
Let's make sure all those receivers have their little bench warmers on. I mean, they were cold in Athens, Georgia. How do you think they're going to feel if they go up to South Bend to play in Indiana? That might be my favorite thing. Now, again,
that won't be the case when it's done, though. Yeah.
This probably doesn't hold up with these rankings, but my goodness, it would be outstanding. They got to at least get one of those teams to have to travel up north.
I mean, I think if Notre Dame wins out, they will host a game, no doubt. If Penn State wins out, they will host a game, no doubt.
Yeah.
Indiana has to win out. Like if Indiana loses to Ohio State, they're going to get in as like a 10, 11, or 12 seed. They're not going to host.
They'll have to travel.
Yeah.
Probably you could probably swap Ole Miss and Indiana around in that scenario. It would be Indiana going to Oxford.
Coming up on the other side, a look at the games in week 13 that could present chaos for these college football playoff rankings. And should we really care about what the hypothetical line would be? All that and more next. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast in a little bit. We will get to, I've collected 8 games that could be potentially throwing a wrench into these rankings. But before we get there, Danny, I know that you sat down with our colleague Josh Pate a little bit earlier today. How'd the friendly debate go?
We just don't see eye to eye, which is okay.
America.
Yeah, exactly. It's all right. I mean, I'm right. He's wrong. I mean, I am for justice.
America.
He's for, the benefits that come with playing in certain brands.
Socialist Josh Pate wants everybody in the SEC to get equal treatment.
Yep. It's true.
Exactly.
Yeah. Spread the news. Socialist Josh Pate wants everybody in the SEC to get a piece.
That's right.
Comrade
the one thing I did learn, though, is I think we're on the same page on Texas. Because, I brought up the conversation is starting to bother me that Indiana has to look the part. And I'm like, well, Texas didn't look the part against Georgia, and they don't really have another resounding win. So why does Texas just get a pass? And while he didn't say, he kind of has an out because he said, if they lose again, they're out. And that's why. I'm like, well, what if they beat A&M? What if A&M loses again, which they're only a 2-point favorite against Auburn? What if they beat a 4-loss? And that would be 4 losses for them, right? So that's their resounding win, who wouldn't be in the top 25. But still, again, they don't get – that's just what I would love to see is everybody get treated the same, like evaluated the same, where you don't get a bump. And I think Penn State gets a huge bump too because of their brand, and they've always been in the top 12, and they're right there all close every year. I think they get a bump. I just don't like – especially for a school like Indiana, who should be given more of a benefit of the doubt. They're held to a tougher standard than some of these teams that, have a history of success.
Yeah, and like we mentioned it earlier, Chip, when we were, talking about Illinois, about how their wins against ranked teams early in the year have kind of lost some of that luster because those teams have gone on to prove that they're just not that good. So when you look at Texas's schedule, it's the same damn story. Like, what's Texas's best win? Is it 6-4 Vandy or is it 5-5 Michigan?
Oh, it's Vanderbilt.
So, and we love Vandy here. No offense to
But-
Vandy,
but
if that's
Tom-
the number one win.
But Tom, Florida's really good now. Like that Florida game, I mean, they just beat LSU. So beating Florida 49-17 is
They
so
beat a Florida
impressive.
team with its third string quarterback.
I know. But I'm just telling you, that's what they'll tell you. That's what the SEC fans will look how impressive they were against Florida, even though Miami did the same thing to Florida. But that was the beginning of the year when Florida wasn't that good then.
Back when Florida still had its starter.
And y'all are in so much trouble
In
when
their
Colorado
stadium.
State wins the Mountain West.
Yeah.
And Texas is like, we beat the Mountain West champs 52-0. I mean, come on now. Who cares if we lost to Texas A&M? That's our spot. Well, so I've got 8 games. Tell me from 1 to 5 upset potential. Ole Miss on the road at Florida.
This weekend?
Yeah.
On a scale of what?
1 to 5.
5 being upset, like on fire alarm?
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
say
5 being like, I am dialed into this. This is going to be
4.
a spot. 4. Yeah.
4.
3.5.
That's high. Yeah. I've shared. I know I've shared with y'all before. I do my one-liners, just rip through every game, just like one line right off the top, first thing that's on your brain. Florida winning is the vibesiest of all vibesy things possible. Throwing chaos into it. The swamp is going nuts. Everyone believes that Billy's going to win them a national championship. And it's just, all it would take is Ole Miss playing slightly down to Florida. Slightly down. Yeah. I'm a full fire alarm 5 for Ole Miss at Florida.
Yeah.
SMU at Virginia.
2.5. Ooh.
It's the ACC.
SMU was
And they're on the
messing around
road.
with, they were messing around with Boston College at home. They could mess around with Virginia. The only thing I would throw in there is if there's any Notre Dame body blow, just because you're coming right off that game. But I'm with you. I was sensing something. All right, Penn State at Minnesota.
2.5.
3.3.
Yeah, I will point out, like, they had that road game against West Virginia, which crazy weather delay. They won by 22, but they were trailing at halftime against USC on the road. They were trailing at halftime against Wisconsin on the road, and they killed Purdue. But Purdue. Still, USC and Wisconsin are the 2 road games against teams they've played with a pulse. Minnesota has been playing much better in recent weeks than they were earlier in the year. I'm not picking it to happen, but I'd say there's like a 25% chance Minnesota beats Penn State this weekend.
Yeah. It's hairy, like I am always rooting for the, but I'd hate it for Penn State. Because then all of a sudden, as Tom wrote in Big Time, which I read, they would be on the chopping block.
Yes, very much.
Like Penn State could miss, like if the wrong set of results and circumstances, a loss to Minnesota this Saturday could take Penn State from number 4 to not in the college football playoff. We're talking about how cool it would be for Happy Valley to host a playoff game. That could be dicey. Again, that game on CBS, 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. All right, BYU at Arizona State.
Oh, that's a 5.
Yeah.
Like, Arizona State's legitimately good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
5.
5. Colorado at Kansas, which is not at Kansas.
5. It's a Big 12 game. Like, unless who's the one Big 12 team right now that you would say has no chance of beating anyone? Oklahoma State, just because they seem to be totally quit. I feel like everybody else in that league has
Houston. If you score 24 points, Houston might not be able to catch up with you.
True, but they won't quit. They will try to beat you.
They will try.
I feel like everybody, like Oklahoma State's the only team I look at and I say that's an automatic win. Everybody else in that league, I feel like, has a shot against anybody else.
Arizona against teams not named Houston, I would not trust. I don't know.
Arizona, Tech McMillan, man.
If Arizona comes back to life and ruins Arizona State's season,
Oh, you better believe they're going to try.
oh god. Okay. So 5 for both Big 12 games.
Yeah, for sure.
Army against Notre Dame in Yankee
1.
Stadium.
1.
1.3.
I will wear my Army hoodie. I love Army, but I'm also a realist, and some battles just won't be won.
Alabama at Oklahoma.
1.
2.
Really?
What's the point spread on that one?
I've got it right now around 14 or so. It's a danger, like
1. Oklahoma can't score.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe
I'd say
Jalen
2,
gets
but
hurt.
like 2, I'm not putting it above. Like, I'm not over the 50% margin here. I'm still at 2. That's pretty low. I'm just like, it's not one we'll be on. Like those Big 12 games will be on the main screen, like watching from start to finish. This one's
let me know if it's close.
Yeah, I'll start tuning in around the third quarter if they're only up by 7. Let's just see what's happening. But it might not even make it to that point, so you might have to watch it at all.
Yeah, I think that your 7:30 option in terms of SEC chaos is the next game, and the last of my 8 games that I've circled: Texas A&M at Auburn.
1.
Ooh.
No, I'll go 2.
Point spread is 2.5, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it? Yeah, I don't care.
I mean, this has got the Cannell jinx all over it because ever since I said Texas A&M was the best team in Texas, they lost to South Carolina, and they're definitely going to lose this game. But I will not budge off. They will still win at Kyle Field in 2 weeks
Against Texas.
Yes,
Against that defense is going to turn the ball over 3 times.
It would be hilarious. It would be hilarious if right after Elko, honest mistake, because they're asking him about Texas, but he goes through this long diatribe and he finishes it off with, you guys have seen this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, no, we've got our minds focused on Texas. I mean,
We've got our
Auburn.
minds focused on Texas. I mean, Auburn.
that was hilarious.
Right? We'll see. Jordan Hare Stadium at night in a season with like you're 4-6. Your best win on the season might be New Mexico.
But
Alabama coming up next.
That's the key. Which game do you think Auburn's going all out to win? Texas A&M or Alabama right now?
I don't know. At home, when you're coming off of, well, Cam Coleman had like 9 catches or something along those lines. Texas A&M, we'll see.
I mean, they will come out trying because bowl eligibility is on the line, and it is going to be senior day. But I'm telling you, if they fall behind, they will retreat and just rally for next week.
Texas A&M, again, 2.5-point favorites. And if they lose, then all of your logjam scenarios are now thrown into an even more complicated place because Texas A&M would then have 2 conference losses, potentially 3 overall. So that's something else to look at in terms of the SEC title race. All right, what about one last thing before we get out of here? Do you believe that an SEC or Big Ten championship game loser will get punished to the point of being left out?
No, but it also depends on the record. Like if real true, like in the Big Ten, I don't think there's any way to escape that the team will be 1 loss and then the loss could be their second, or if it's Oregon, it'll be their first.
Right.
If there's enough chaos in the SEC where there's like a 3-loss team in the championship game, if that team loses, yeah, I think it could be left out, but I really don't think it will be left out because Sankey's already started the stumping. But also, like I said earlier, 2 leagues control this sport. 2 leagues will get what they want.
What about the score? I think the score matters. Like, and if that's the bar we're going to hold Indiana to, but man, it's going to be it's going to be a really hard pill to swallow if you make it to a championship game and you get beat by 2 touchdowns, which we've seen happen before in a couple of these championship games, but they've had divisions, so we've seen lopsided. And then you get set home pack and you see a team that you may have beaten in the regular season that didn't have to play in that game and they get to advance. That's why I don't think we survive 2 years of this. I think it'll be 2 years, 2 and done.
I hope we survive 2 years.
Right. We might not. I mean, I don't know what the contracts are and if they can rip them up, but that's the biggest flaw in this system is that you could make it there and get punished so much that you don't get a chance. Like, and I do think like if you see a team get blown out by 4 touchdowns or something like that, then I think you're done. Like, I think they'll see that there's a recency bias. That's, we can't have that happen. So they'll punish them.
I'll probably be like living on a mountain 2 years from now, not paying attention to any of this stuff anyway.
I think contractually I'm going to be right here with you hosting the Cover 3 podcast. Doing instant reaction shows on a Tuesday, baby. And happy to do it. All right, we will be back Wednesday, 11 a.m. Eastern time as we take you inside the matchups. Thank you to all of y'all who are checking us out on CBS Sports Network or listening wherever you get your podcast, watching us on youtube.com/cover3. We've enjoyed doing those shows. That is where you will find our big game breakdown for Ohio State, Indiana, as well as Penn State, Minnesota. We'll do more big game breakdowns for the biggest matchups for week 13 on Wednesday, plus a little day trade and Danny. Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern time, we got our locks. Then Saturday night for our instant reaction show, youtube.com/cover3. Go and hit that subscribe. Smash it if you don't mind. And you can follow him on Twitter at Tom Fernelli. You can follow him at Danny Cannell. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.